In the 10th year of having a crush on Jason, Violet finally became Mrs. Jason. Everyone said that the eldest son of the Jason family chose her only because he couldn't marry his first love. However, Violet thought that love would grow over time after marriage. Until Jason's first love became widowed, and it seemed that Violet also became a widow in a sense. He ignored the fact that Violet was pregnant and went to accompany his first love for 3 days and 3 nights. Violet didn't cry or make a fuss. She quietly disappeared into the night. Later, when they met again, Jason tightly grasped Violet's wrist, his voice trembling. "Violet, where is our child?" Violet smiled faintly. "We don't have a child." "Jason, are you almost here?" "Almost. Then I'll wait for you by the roadside." There was sweet excitement hidden in Violet's voice. Because she had just found out that she was pregnant. It was her and Jason's child. Since they got married 2 years ago, there had been a lot of rumors outside. Almost everyone was saying that Jason married Violet because Luna had married someone else. Jason and Luna were childhood sweethearts and had an on-again, off-again relationship for nearly 8 years. Just when Jason was about to persuade his family to accept Luna, Luna suddenly announced her wedding news. The groom wasn't Jason. Overnight, he became a laughingstock in everyone's eyes. So, in a fit of anger, Jason proposed to Violet in public. There were no flowers nor a ring, just 2 thin marriage certificates. Even Violet's parents reminded her, "Violet, Jason doesn't really love you." But Violet still married him without hesitation. Because she had been in love with Jason for a full 10 years. From the time when she first fell in love to when she graduated from university, Jason had always been the only one on her mind. Because she had been in love with Jason for a full 10 years. Even if the whole world opposed it, Violet still held a glimmer of hope. She naively thought that love would grow over time after marriage. As long as she was nice to Jason. Really nice to him. Once she got him, she would surely win his heart, sooner or later. Especially in recent days. It seemed that Jason had started to like her a little. He would make breakfast for her. Coax her to get up. He would buy her flowers when she was unhappy. He would also kiss her affectionately when she was angry. In the charming night, Jason whispered in her ear temptingly, "Violet, give me a baby." Violet was completely captivated and thought that what was waiting for her next was a happy life as a family of 3. But today, Luna's husband died unexpectedly. As soon as Violet got into the car, she heard Jason's cell phone ring. The car was too quiet. Even without the speaker on, Luna's voice on the other end of the phone was still very clear. She cried and asked Jason, "Jason, Jason. I'm so scared. I don't know what to do. Can you come and accompany me?" "Okay." Jason agreed without hesitation. It was as if the person beside him at this moment wasn't Violet, wasn't his legal wife. Jason asked Violet to go home by herself first. Violet subconsciously reached out and gently tugged at his sleeve. But before she could say anything, Jason impatiently shook her off, frowned and hissed, "A life has been lost over there. Can't you be more sensible?" Violet trembled at being shouted at and withdrew her outstretched hand. She almost dropped the ultrasound report that she had wanted to show Jason. She actually didn't mean to stop Jason. In the 2 years since they got married, although Jason had never mentioned Luna in front of her, but Violet knew that he probably hadn't completely let go of her in his heart. Even when they were most affectionate. The way he looked at Violet seemed like he was looking at someone else through her. So now Violet just wanted to tell him, "Jason, you're going to be a father." Violet hoped that for the sake of the child, even if he was alone with Luna in a room, he could at least behave properly. Don't let their child become a laughingstock before it was even born. Jason was stunned for a moment, then nodded, "Okay. I got it. Have a good rest at home. I'll go and check. I'll come back as soon as everything is okay." His as soon as turned out to be 3 days and 3 nights. During the day, he accompanied Luna to handle all kinds of things. He even helped arrange Luna's husband's funeral. Her best friend Sunny couldn't stand it and called Violet, "Violet, are you just going to let Jason cheat on you like this?" At that time, Violet was sitting in front of the French window. Beside her was the ultrasound report from a few days ago. She had wanted to show it to Jason. But unfortunately, before she could hand it over, Jason had left her behind and rushed to accompany Luna first. After that, she could only see Jason's figure in gossip news. Every time, Luna was by his side. The two were inseparable and seemed more like a couple than she and Jason did. Violet smiled self-deprecatingly and replied in a low voice, "I can't get through to his phone." On the first day, Jason still told her that he couldn't come back for the time being. There was no news on the second day. On the third day, when Violet wanted to call to ask about the progress of handling things, no one answered. After she called a few more times, Jason even directly put her on the blacklist. There was no explanation. It seemed that there was no need for an explanation either. After all, the person he was accompanying now was Luna. She was the one he had wanted but couldn't have. His first love. Sunny was even angrier than she was. "If you can't get through to his phone, then tell his parents. Let them contact him." "No, why not? You're Jason's legal wife. It's okay if he accompanies Luna during the day. But he even stays at Luna's house at night. What does he think of you?" Violet didn't know what Jason thought of her either. Maybe she was just a tool used to make Luna jealous. Or maybe, since he was about a certain age, he needed to get married and have children to give his family an explanation. There were many possibilities. The only impossible thing was that Jason loved her. At this moment, Violet suddenly realized how ridiculous and stupid her previous thought that Jason liked her a little was. On the fourth day, Jason finally showed up, but he also brought Luna back with him. He said that Luna's emotions were very unstable now, and as she was left alone, he was afraid that something unexpected might happen. Violet looked at Luna standing beside him. Before she could say anything, Luna started crying pitifully. "Violet, I'm just staying for a few days. There's nothing between Jason and me. Don't misunderstand." This Violet was clearly deliberately trying to distance her from Jason. She told Violet not to misunderstand. But looking at her appearance, it seemed that she wished Violet would misunderstand. Especially when Jason turned around to pour her a glass of water. Luna even gave Violet a provocative look. Violet looked at her quietly. From the moment Jason brought her home, all of Violet's hopes in her heart had been extinguished. No normal person could bear it when their husband blatantly brought his first love home and lived under the same roof with them. Jason probably also forgot that when they first got married, he had said to Violet, "Violet, let's live a good life together." So this was what he meant by living a good life together. Violet just felt a chill spreading quickly and enveloping her whole body. All her obsessions also dissipated at this moment. She smiled calmly at Luna. "Since Luna is in trouble, it's not impossible for her to stay at our house for a while. But don't worry. I definitely won't snatch Jason from you." Luna interrupted her insincerely. Violet shook her head. "That's not what I meant. I meant that I'm pregnant and probably won't be able to take good care of Luna. So in the following days, please make yourself at home." Luna trembled violently upon hearing this and turned pale as she looked at Jason. In this situation, it seemed that Violet was the mistress, pregnant with her husband's child. And she was silently questioning. And when Jason faced her hurt look, he was indeed flustered. He took Luna's hand. "I'll take you to rest first. We'll talk about other things later." Luna was led away by him in a daze for a few steps. Then she suddenly came to her senses, shook off his hand, rushed into the room without thinking, and locked the door behind her. Jason knocked on the door outside. Getting no response, he turned around and stared at Violet. That look was the blame that Violet was familiar with. In the 2 years since they got married, although he didn't mention Luna in front of Violet, others would. Occasionally, when Violet talked to others for a couple of sentences, he would stare at Violet like this. It seemed that Luna was some kind of sacred existence that Violet wasn't even worthy of mentioning her name. After that day, Jason never entered the master bedroom again. He slept in the guest room closest to Luna. At night when he was at home, Luna was meek and sickly. Violet could always hear her calling Jason in a weak voice. "Jason, I'm thirsty. Could you pour me a glass of water?" "Jason, what? It's thundering outside. I'm a little scared." "Jason, you're always with me. Will Violet be angry?" Violet wasn't angry. It was just that the weather outside was getting colder day by day. And her heart was also getting colder day by day. Jason was so considerate to Luna in front of her. She didn't dare to think about how intimate the two of them were in the first 3 days. When Jason was pampering Luna, did he ever think of her? Did he ever think of the child in her belly? Jason also wouldn't know what Luna's true face was like during the day after he left. Violet. How long are you going to endure this? Isn't it clear enough who Jason loves in his heart? Even if you're pregnant with his child, he won't like you. At worst, we'll keep the child and get rid of you. But do you trust your child with me? This last sentence really reminded Violet. Jason didn't love her. So naturally he wouldn't love her child either. If the child was born, it would either follow her through a life of hardship, or it would stay in the Jason family with Luna as the stepmother. It shouldn't be like that. And it couldn't be like that. Violet put down her chopsticks and replied faintly, "Tonight. I'll talk to Jason tonight." Luna raised her eyebrows, looking like she was waiting to watch a good show. That night, Jason came back very late. Luna had eaten the food mixed with sleeping pills and had gone to bed early. Seeing Violet sitting alone in the living room, Jason asked, "Where's Luna?" The way he addressed her was so intimate. But when it came to her, except when they were in bed, he always called her Violet by her full name. Who was distant and who was close was clear at a glance. Violet's heart sank a little deeper, and she replied faintly with 3 words, "She's asleep." Jason nodded and turned to go back to the room. Since Luna became widowed, it seemed that Violet had also become a widow, in a sense. The person who used to be so affectionate with her now found it annoying to even look at her more. Although Violet had known from the very beginning that Jason married her just to make Luna jealous, she was too greedy. Knowing that everything was like a mirage, she still gradually fell into the illusory warmth of daily life. Now that the illusion had shattered and the truth was laid bare before her eyes, she didn't want to accept it, but she had no choice but to accept it. Violet's hand under the table unconsciously clenched tightly. With great difficulty, she asked, "Jason, Knight, have you ever loved me?" Jason stopped in his tracks and turned around with that impatient look on his face again. He asked coldly in reply, "We already have a child. Why are you talking about love or not now? But I love you so much. It's been 12 years. Violet looked straight at him. Her voice calm yet powerful. Word by word, it seemed to have an echo effect on its own, constantly looping in her ears, shaking her heart with pain. Before this second, her love for Jason had been sincere. Unfortunately, the love that she had once hoped would grow over time didn't turn out as she wished in the end. Now all that was left was mutual dislike. Violet found him annoying even when she looked at him now. Jason was stunned by what she said. His handsome brows moved slightly, as if his emotions had been stirred up. Violet thought he would say something. But after waiting for a while, Jason just said in a reprobative tone, "Luna's husband just passed away. Is it appropriate for you to talk about love with me at this time?" So he knew that Luna's husband had just passed away. So he also knew that it wasn't appropriate to talk about love at this time. But Violet thought he couldn't wait to be with Luna. Her heart ached even more. Violet endured the pain and finally asked him, "Jason, are you looking forward to our child?" Jason tightened his lips, his expression gloomy, and his brows furrowed into a knot. There wasn't a shred of expectation in his eyes. This result was already within Violet's expectation. But people are so strange. She was afraid that the result would be different from what she expected, and even more afraid that it would be the same as what she expected. She heard Jason say, "No matter what happens in the future, if the child is born, our Jason family will definitely raise it." Violet's heart was completely broken. After her emotions collapsed, her voice became a bit muffled. She said, "Forget it then." Jason didn't hear clearly and asked her, "What?" Violet smiled and shook her head. "Nothing. It's getting late. You should go to bed early." After saying that, she didn't care what expression Jason had and walked ahead to the master bedroom. Perhaps Jason would find it very strange. Tonight, it was obvious that she was going to solve the entanglement between him and Luna. But she only said half of what she wanted to say and suddenly stopped. Jason had been ready to face Violet's questioning or even scolding. But neither happened. Violet just disappeared quietly into the night with her packed luggage after he also fell asleep. The 12 sincere and fearless years were ended by herself tonight. Perhaps because Violet had been too kind to Jason in the past years. Jason didn't take Violet's disappearance seriously. He even thought that Violet was just throwing a tantrum because she was pregnant and hoped that he would coax her. But now he was completely occupied with Luna. Even if Violet was really just throwing a tantrum and would come back if he coaxed her a little, he wasn't willing to lower himself. However, Violet wasn't throwing a tantrum. She disappeared completely. Day after day, month after month, she never showed up again. Jason didn't seem to be affected. He still went in and out with Luna and had fun with his friends. The only change was probably that he had been drinking more heavily recently. In the past, he would get drunk at most twice out of 10 times of drinking. Now, out of 10 times of drinking, he would get drunk at least 6 times. At first, Luna would accompany him when he went out to play and would take care of him when he was drunk. Later, seeing that he was getting drunk out of control, she became a bit impatient. Well, she didn't come with him today. In the brightly lit and noisy private room, his childhood friend Chase took the opportunity to sit beside Jason and asked in a low voice, "Are you really not going to look for Violet anymore?" Jason's eyelids twitched, and something flashed across his expression very quickly. In an instant, he regained his cold look and sneered as he asked back, "Why should I look for her? Who does she think she is? She's your wife. She doesn't have to be." Chase, that infälld my session. Outsiders didn't know that when Violet left, she left a signed divorce agreement. She clearly loved Jason so much. But in the end, she didn't want anything and just wanted a clean break. Jason didn't realize it until he saw that divorce agreement. That night, Violet really wanted to solve all the problems. But if she couldn't solve the problem between him and Luna, then she would solve the problem with him. And the quickest solution was divorce. At first, after Violet left, Jason didn't feel anything special. Even because Luna came back to him, he was in a daze every day as if he was on cloud 9. However, even the most loving couple will have a time when the sweet period is over. What's more, Jason and Luna had known each other for so many years and had broken up and gotten back together many times before. The novelty of getting back together only existed in the early days. Later, it was just an ordinary life like everyone else's. It was on an ordinary day when Jason came home from work and found the house empty and in a mess that he suddenly thought of Violet. When she was here, the house was always spotless. The clothes he was going to wear every morning would be matched in advance and hung in a conspicuous place by her. When he was drunk from socializing at night, no matter what time it was, she would come to pick him up with just one phone call. She never lost her temper and was always gentle. But it was such a well-behaved and obedient person, who left without leaving a word and just dumped him like that. And she also left a divorce agreement that he didn't understand. Did he agree to the divorce? Jason was furious when he thought of that divorce agreement. He suddenly stood up, took his coat, and walked out. Chase called after him, "Hey, are you leaving now?" Jason didn't look back. The people beside didn't know what had happened and curiously came over and asked, "Chase, what's wrong with Jason? He doesn't seem very happy." "Chase, he's probably missing his wife." "Ah?" Chase smiled and didn't say anything more. Others didn't understand Jason. But didn't he know him well? On the surface, he was as stubborn as could be. But secretly, he had been going crazy looking for Violet. Some feelings probably need an opportunity to make people who have been deeply involved in them without realizing it suddenly wake up. Ha is high. Violet had been staring blankly at the project proposal on the table for over 10 minutes. Colleague Chen Yishan had packed up her things and was about to leave. When she saw that Violet was still in a daze, she came over to care about her. "Violet, what's wrong? Are you too tired recently?" Violet suddenly came to her senses and smiled. Now, by then, Chen Yishan had walked to her side and naturally glanced at the project proposal on her table. It was the project in Jing City. Chen Yishan immediately understood that her daze just now was probably because of her resistance and reluctance to go back to Jing City. She didn't want to go back to the old place, see the old people, and bring back sad memories. she comforted Violet. If you don't want to go back, don't force yourself. There will be plenty of projects in the future. Violet shook her head. I don't not want to go back. I just feel that time flies so fast. Today, after the boss handed the project proposal to her, she was a bit dazed and then calculated the time. It turned out that it had been almost 3 years since she left Jing City. When she first came here, because she was new to the place and didn't know anyone, every day she just went to work and then went home to sleep. Colleagues all said that she was like a heartless work machine. Later, when everyone got a bit more familiar, they naturally asked Violet about her past. Violet just said faintly at that time, I'm divorced. These four simple words shocked all the colleagues into silence. Chen Weishan was one of the colleagues who was close to Violet in the company and usually wouldn't ask Violet anything. It was during a company team building activity that Violet got drunk. On the way Chen Weishan was sending her home. Somehow, Violet suddenly brought it up on her own. She said that she had liked someone for 12 whole years. She said that when she loved him the most, she wanted to have a child for him and wanted the happiness of a family of 3. But finally, she said, I don't love him anymore. When Violet said this sentence, she was smiling. It was like the unconscious smile of a drunk person. But Chen Weishan saw that her eyes were moist. She must have been in great pain. So painful that she wanted to cry. 12 years. How many 12 years can there be in one's life? Chen Weishan felt so sorry for Violet at that time and cursed the man who had Violet down as the worst scumbag. She didn't know that the so-called worst scumbag was the client in the project proposal. Could it be? Chen Weishan grabbed the project proposal, opened it, and pointed at the name of the client company. Violet nodded. Chen Weishan silently closed her eyes and began to worry for Violet in her heart. No wonder you don't want to take this project. Who would be happy if their ex-husband became the client? Violet smiled and didn't explain anymore. But in fact, she had already made a decision in her heart. She would take this project and go back to Jing City. Because when she left 3 years ago, she only left a divorce agreement and didn't officially get a divorce certificate with Jason. When she left sadly back then, she wasn't procrastinating about anything and had never thought of getting back together with Jason. She just felt that she had reached her limit at that moment. If she didn't leave, she would die. Fortunately, having fulfilled my ancestor, all that was over. Those sleepless and painful nights finally saw the dawn. So it was time to go back to Jing City. To go back to see Jason. To go back and get divorced officially. Jason had never thought that he would meet Violet again in the workplace. That day, Jace called him and said that a friend from Ha's High was coming to talk about business and wanted to introduce him. At that time, Jason had just quarreled with Luna and was in a terrible mood. He didn't listen carefully that the person coming to talk about business was from Ha's High. And before, when he asked people to check Violet's whereabouts, he had found that Violet had appeared in Ha's High. But later, when he wanted the exact location, the clue suddenly disappeared. At this moment, he just thought that after talking about business, he could just drag Chase to drink. So he went. Then, let out a low sigh. The person who had disappeared for nearly 3 years appeared in his sight without any warning. It was Violet. Her long hair had been cut short and was hanging straight and smoothly on her shoulders. She was wearing an exquisite and capable business suit with a cold and powerful aura. She didn't avoid Jason's gaze and just looked at him calmly. Eye to eye. Those eyes that used to be always gentle and affectionate now only showed the coldness and aloofness of handling business matters. Jason seemed to be under a spell and stared at her without blinking. Everything around seemed to disappear. He could only see Violet. Chase, who was beside him, saw his appearance and felt a bit gloating. He deliberately clenched his fist loosely and put it to his lips and coughed gently. Jason instantly came to his senses and quickly hid the surprise in his eyes. And the fleeting admiration. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Chase continued to stab him in the heart. What? Don't you recognize your ex-wife? Jason. After being speechless for a while, he immediately turned back to look at Violet. His gaze moved down inch by inch and finally landed on Violet's belly. He seemed to be in a daze. Even if Violet had kept the baby. By this time, the child would have already been born. What could he possibly see by looking at Violet's belly? Violet smiled and generously extended her hand towards him. President Jason. Hello. I'm Violet. Jason refused to shake hands with her, with his hands in his pockets. He stood there arrogantly. Violet wasn't annoyed either. Her expression hardly changed at all. She just calmly withdrew her hand. Seeing this, Jason felt even more displeased. He snorted coldly and turned to Chase, asking in a cold and harsh tone, "What's the meaning of your arrangement?" Chase pretended to be innocent. "There's no other meaning. Today we're gathered here to talk about business. Everyone wants to make money. Talk about business?" Jason gritted his teeth with a forced smile and suddenly swore. "Fuck your business, Chase." He had thought that Jason would keep being stubborn. Unexpectedly, as soon as Violet appeared, he was thrown into chaos and lost all his composure. Naturally, having fulfilled Ryan's session, Violet had never expected to see such a Jason either. During the 3 years she had been away, she had never heard that Jason had tried to find her. Both of their families and friends knew each other. If he had really looked for her, it would have been impossible not to hear a single rumor. So Violet thought that when they met again, they should both be calm. Either they would politely talk about business affairs, or they would ruthlessly discuss divorce. However, Jason didn't want to talk about anything with her. He just asked her in a deep voice, "You still know to come back, Violet?" "President Jason. I'm here today on behalf of my company and want to cooperate with your group." Jason sneered. "Do you think I'll cooperate with you? It's not me with you, but company to company. As long as it's the company you represent, I won't you." Before Jason could finish his words, Violet suddenly lost her patience. She turned to Chase and said, "Finn, honey, leave too. I think President Jason isn't in a stable mood today. I'll come to talk to him again when he's in a better mood next time." Jason? Chase really wanted to laugh when he saw Jason being put in a difficult position. But he was afraid that if he laughed out loud on the spot, Jason might kill him to silence him. After Violet finished speaking, she nodded politely at Jason and then left. Jason? At this time, Chase couldn't hold back anymore. Although he still didn't dare to laugh in front of Jason, he turned around and his shoulders were shaking with laughter. Jason's face was completely black. After Violet left, Jason glared at Chase angrily and also planned to leave. Chase stopped him. "Jason, don't you want to ask me how I got in touch with Violet? Will you tell me?" Jason turned around and asked back with anger. Ever since the moment Violet had unexpectedly appeared in front of him, he had known that his brother had betrayed him. So he didn't expect Chase to tell him the truth. But at this time, Chase suddenly picked up his phone and played a recording. "Violet, how long are you going to endure it? What does Luna mean by asking this? Isn't it clear enough who Jason likes in his heart? Yes, having fulfilled my obsession. It's quite clear. Then divorce him as soon as possible. Why should I listen to you? Why? Even if you're pregnant with his child, he won't like you. I see. Don't try to use the child to tie him down shamelessly. Worst case, we'll keep the child and get rid of you. But are you willing to let me raise your child?" It was a conversation between Violet and Luna. In the recording, Luna was pressing Violet hard, and every word she said was so shameless and vicious, while Violet remained calm all along. Unless one listened very carefully, only a trace of desolation could be heard from her calm voice. Jason was so shocked by this recording that he almost froze on the spot. After a while, he slowly opened his mouth and asked Chase, "Where did you get this recording?" Violet sent it to Sunny when they were chatting. "And I stole it from Sunny's phone." Jason frowned. "How did you steal it? Do you know her phone password? Or can you hack into her phone?" Chase, "I'm having an affair with her." Jason? No wonder he always felt that this guy was particularly partial to Violet. Others would sacrifice themselves for their brothers. Well, he stabbed his brother twice for the sake of his lover's best friend. Jason was so angry that he sneered repeatedly. "So, you've known about Violet for a long time?" "No, I didn't," Chase quickly explained. "I just received a call from Violet yesterday." "What did she say to you?" "She just said she was coming to talk about cooperation." Jason. Seeing that he was about to fly into a rage, Chase added fearlessly. You didn't seem to care about her before. So I didn't say it was her who was coming. I thought you would treat her as a stranger and seriously talk about cooperation. Jason. If you weren't in good health, he might have been really angered to death by him. After taking a deep breath to calm down his emotions, he asked Chase again. You've had this recording for a long time. Why are you taking it out now? Chase spread his hands helplessly and amused lie. If I had taken it out earlier, would you have believed it? When Violet had just left, he and Luna were so affectionate that he couldn't listen to what others said at all. Even if Chase had taken out the recording, he would have just thought that Chase was trying to sow discord. So he had to wait for an opportunity. Wait until the sweet period between Jason and Luna was over. Wait until Jason started to miss Violet. And wait until Violet reappeared. Chase said. Jason. Luna isn't as good as you think. Think about it. When your parents stopped you from being together at first, it wasn't because there was a problem with her family's company. Your parents had always said that Luna had problems with her character. Just like later, when Luna's husband passed away, she called Jason on the same day. How could a person with normal values contact their ex at that time? Moreover, her ex was already married. Jason. Think about it carefully yourself. Between Luna and Violet, which one really loves you? And which one do you really love? After leaving Chase's office, Jason sat silently in the car for 2 hours. During this period, Luna had been calling him, but he didn't answer any of the calls. All he could think about was Violet. Violet who used to be so obedient to him. And Violet who was now cold and distant towards him. It was clearly still the same face and the same person. But some things had just changed. And these changes made him feel very uncomfortable. He had no other thoughts now. He just wanted to see Violet immediately and ask her about everything. Jason picked up his phone and sent a WeChat message to Chase. Which hotel is she staying at? Chase sent a screenshot. The hotel wasn't far away. It would take about 5 minutes to drive there. But suddenly Jason felt that even 5 minutes was terribly long. Every second seemed to be stretched into a century. Especially when waiting for the traffic lights. He felt inexplicably irritable in his heart. Finally, having fulfilled labor, when he arrived at the hotel, as soon as he entered the lobby, he happened to see Violet coming out of the elevator, chatting and laughing with a man. There were people rushing to catch the elevator passing by quickly. The man immediately reached out to block them, for fear that Violet would be bumped into. That gesture, as a man himself, Jason could tell at a glance. It was protection and also possessiveness. Jason got angry at once and strode forward. Violet had been chatting and laughing with her colleague. Suddenly there was a person in front of her, and she almost couldn't stop in time and bumped into him. Watch out! The person beside her pulled her back. Violet was caught off guard and fell into her colleague's arms. At that second, it was as if something exploded in Jason's mind. Without thinking too much, he immediately reached out and pulled Violet back. Both Violet and her colleague were stunned. She only heard Jason asking in a stiff voice above her head, "Who is this?" Violet slowly raised her head and met Jason's angry gaze. She didn't quite understand why Jason was angry and on what grounds he was angry. Who was the one who brought his first love home regardless of her pregnancy? Who was the one who never entered the master bedroom again later because of his first love? And on the night of their last conversation, did he care about her or the child at all? Now what was he pretending to be so hypocritical here for? Violet felt disgusted in her heart, but her face remained calm. She calmly reminded him. "President Jason. Please let go." Jason sneered. "Let go of you? And then what? Do you want to hold hands with him?" "Violet. Don't forget that we haven't officially divorced yet." The colleague was a bit surprised when he heard this and looked at Violet. The guests coming and going around also cast curious glances one after another. Violet really didn't want to be watched like a monkey. So she turned around and was about to leave. Jason wanted to stop her. But Violet's colleague stopped him first. "President Jason. Although our company wants to talk about cooperation with you, isn't it too much for you to harass her so blatantly? Get lost." Jason's attitude was very arrogant. The colleague was about to say something more. but Violet shook her head at him. After all, the Jason family had some influence in Beijing. If they angered Jason and something really happened, it wouldn't be worth it. Besides, she didn't want to involve others in her private affairs with Jason. Violet looked up and said, "Jason, let's talk about the divorce. How do you want to talk about it?" Violet first gave her colleague a look and the latter nodded knowingly and left first. Then Violet pointed to a corner and signaled Jason to go there. Jason was still a bit angry and had a gloomy face. Violet didn't care about him and walked over and sat down first. After waiting for a while, Jason reluctantly sat down opposite her, still with an air of superiority. "How do you want to talk about it?" "Violet, I should be the one asking you this question. Right? Shouldn't President Jason be more eager to get divorced than me? Otherwise, with your married status, how can Luna stay by your side rightfully?" When Luna was mentioned, Jason's face seemed to become even uglier. He didn't answer Violet squashed and directly and just said, "I'll handle the matter between me and Luna myself. What we need to talk about now is the matter between you and me. Violet, I've already given you the signed divorce agreement." "Jason, when did I say I wanted a divorce?" "Violet, was there anyone more shameless than him in the world? Or did he think that she really loved him so much without any bottom line that she could live under the same roof with his first love and share a husband with her?" Violet was so angry that she laughed. "If President Jason isn't willing to part on good terms, then I can also file for divorce." Jason's eyes darkened. He was very angry, but there was another emotion that came even more strongly. It was fear. The old Violet couldn't leave him. But the current Violet kept addressing him as President Jason and talking about divorce all the time. It seemed that she really couldn't wait to draw a clear line from him. Jason just imagined the scene of Violet falling in love with someone else in his mind. And he felt like he was going to explode. Perhaps Chase was right. He had already fallen in love with Violet. It was just that the old Violet was too docile. And with Luna causing trouble in between, he hadn't realized his love for Violet. Until Violet suddenly left that night. And until this moment when he saw Violet chatting and laughing with another man. Jason finally began to be afraid, even when Luna announced her wedding news back then. He was just angry and hadn't been this scared. Jason was so distracted that he didn't know what to say. After waiting for a long time and seeing no sign that he was going to speak, Violet didn't want to wait any longer and got up to leave. However, just as she had taken 2 steps, Jason suddenly stood up too. Before Violet could turn around, her wrist was grasped first. "Violet." Jason's deep and repressed voice came from behind her. "Have you fallen in love with someone else? It's none of your business. But you said you would love me forever. Did I? I don't remember." Violet tried to pull her hand back, but Jason grasped it even tighter. When he spoke again, it seemed that his voice was trembling a little. "Violet, where is our child?" He finally asked about the child. That child who had never been expected by him from the very beginning. A dispensable child. Violet turned around and looked at him quietly for several seconds. Then a faint smile appeared on her lips. "We don't have a child." On the 3rd day after arriving in High, she went to the hospital to have an abortion. Because she had no relatives there, and someone had to accompany her for the operation, Violet hired a female college student temporarily. The little girl was very kind. Originally, Harry fulfilled so they had agreed that she only needed to accompany Violet until the operation was over. But seeing that Violet was alone, she not only sent Violet home but also stayed with Violet for half a day more. Before leaving, she also helped Violet prepare dinner and told Violet to have a good rest. Violet smiled and nodded to her. The little girl opened the door and left. When the door closed, a certain switch in Violet's heart was turned on. A person who was paid to do a job could still show extra care and concern for her. But the person she had loved for 12 years only hurt her again and again. Before leaving, she had mentioned the child to Jason more than once. However, Jason had never shown an expectant attitude. Now, what right did he have to ask about the child? Violet said coldly, "I don't love you anymore. And I would never give birth to your child." Hearing this, Jason seemed to be struck by lightning and froze on the spot. Such a reaction was really ridiculous. If he really cared about the child, How could he have brought Luna home when he knew she was pregnant? Did he provide the environment and mood that a pregnant woman needed? Since he had already done everything that shouldn't have been done back then. Now, who was this hypocritical act for? Violet looked at him coldly. Without any emotion in her voice. President Jason. I've already given you an answer to your question. Can we now talk about the divorce properly? Why? Jason approached with red eyes. Each of his words seemed to be squeezed out between his teeth, carrying a strong sense of hatred. Violet. You can blame me or resent me. But the child is innocent. Why did you abort the child? I don't want to be a single mother. And you could have given birth to the child and sent it to the Jason family. And then let Luna be the stepmother of her child? Violet thought that what she had just said was still too euphemistic and rational. So Jason hadn't really understood what she meant. She simply laid out what was on her mind. Jason. I aborted the child because I don't love you anymore. I don't want to have a child related to you. Do you understand now? Violet. Jason was furious and grabbed her arm tightly. Violet frowned in pain and even gasped. But Jason seemed to be blind and couldn't see it at all. Even he said something even more absurd. You love me so much. How could you abort my child? Tell me. Where did you hide the child? Violet's silence was deafening. She couldn't believe that the person she had liked for 12 years had such a dark and twisted heart. Violet called his name word by word and then pried his fingers open one by one. If Jason exerted force, she would use even more force. Later on, Violet couldn't even tell whether she simply wanted to break free from Jason's grip or wanted to break his fingers. Jason also seemed not to be afraid of pain and kept pestering her, repeatedly asking her where she had hidden the child. I had someone check your whereabouts before. I knew you went to High and also found out that you went to the hospital for prenatal checkups. Violet was slightly shocked. She had thought before that Jason had never looked for her. It turned out that he had looked for her and even knew that she was in High. But since Jason knew her whereabouts, why hadn't he urged her to come back to formally divorce in the past 3 years? Was it because of the child in her belly? Just as this thought crossed her mind, Violet's cell phone rang. It was Sunny calling. Violet answered the call in front of Jason. Sunny said quickly in an excited voice on the other end, "Oh my God. Guess what gossip I just heard? It turns out that Luna can't have children." Luna can't have children. How do you know? I have a distant cousin who married the cousin of Luna's deceased husband. She said that their whole family had known for a long time that Luna couldn't have children. So Luna went to find Jason on the first day after her husband died. They didn't bother to care and were all waiting to see Jason's joke. The lobby of the hotel wasn't quiet. There was soft music playing. And there were quite a lot of guests coming and going. Even in the corner, there were always other sounds in one's ears. But Sunny's voice was really loud. Violet felt that her eardrums were hurting from the noise. Even without the speaker on, Jason could clearly hear what she said. In an instant, Jason's face became very embarrassed. Once wasn't enough for Luna to make him a laughingstock. And there was a second time. The coldness on Violet's face faded. And she looked at him with a bit of amusement instead. No wonder he wouldn't accept the fact that she had aborted the child. No wonder he had been constantly asking about the child's whereabouts. It turned out that it was because Luna couldn't have children. And Jason was the only son of the Jason family. His parents would never allow the Jason family to have no descendants in his generation. Then the most perfect solution was for her to give birth to that child. In this way, having fulfilled the obsession, he could continue to be with Luna, and he wouldn't have to worry that the Jason family would have no descendants. Perfect? Too perfect. If Violet weren't the person involved, she would even want to praise Jason. How could he have such a clever mind and come up with such a mean and shameless idea? She laughed sarcastically without hiding her feelings. President Jason. You are really farsighted and masterful in planning. Jason's face looked ugly. It's not what you think. It doesn't matter what it is. I'll say it again. Either we part on good terms, or I'll sue for divorce. Jason frowned and thought for a few seconds. Violet thought that his expression had softened and thought he would agree to the divorce. But Jason said, I can agree to the divorce, but on the condition that you send the child back to the Jason family first. At this point, all he cared about was that child. He hadn't listened to Violet's request at all. Violet felt powerless and also thought he was ridiculous. She simply went along with what he said. If you want to see the child, that's fine. First, we need to negotiate the cooperation well. Jason, come to me directly with the contract tonight. Tonight won't work. Why? Are you going on a date with that man just now? Violet didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He and I are just colleagues. I don't have time tonight because I'm going back to see my parents. Jason, I'll go with you. Violet. It didn't seem very convenient. Not to mention how much her parents hated Jason now. There was also a special guest at her home tonight. Violet had told her parents before that she had no intention of starting a new relationship for the time being. Firstly, cutting fulfilledly. Because she hadn't formally divorced Jason yet. Secondly, because the previous experience had left too big a shadow. And she was also afraid of getting involved in a relationship again. But her parents couldn't help but worry about her. Tonight, on the surface, they asked her to come back for dinner. But in fact, they had arranged a blind date for her. Finn, the young master of the Finn family who had just returned to China, 2 years younger than Violet. With thick eyebrows and big eyes. Full of vitality. Just by looking at the photo, one could feel his surging hormones. Vaguely carrying a wild charm. Violet didn't plan to get in touch with this younger brother and develop a relationship with him. And naturally, she didn't want him to meet Jason either. To avoid more troubles. However, just because she didn't let Jason go to her home didn't mean that Jason would obediently listen. Sure enough, just as she entered the door, Jason arrived right after. Violet's mother, Mrs. Violet, immediately pulled a long face and asked coldly, "What are you doing here?" Jason didn't answer but first glanced inside the house. Violet and Finn were sitting on the same sofa. Although there was a bit of distance between them, it wasn't like the Violet family only had that one sofa. They must have been arranged to sit together on purpose. Jason curled his lips and laughed sarcastically. "Mom, Violet and I haven't divorced yet. Don't call me Mom. Mrs. Violet's voice became even colder and harsher. Don't come looking for our Violet. Go find your Luna. Jason, Luna and I are just friends. Violet and I are husband and wife." Husband and wife? Mrs. Violet seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. She raised her finger and pointed at Jason. "Do you still remember that you and Violet are husband and wife? Who is it that brought his lover home to live? And who continued to live with his lover after Violet disappeared?" "Jason, Luna is living in her own house now." "Is that her own house? Didn't you buy it for her?" Mrs. Violet became more and more angry and her body began to tremble slightly. She pointed at the door and said to Jason, "Get out." Such an embarrassing situation in person was the first time for Jason, who had been pampered since childhood, to endure. But surprisingly, he didn't get angry and just stood there silently. Seeing that he wouldn't leave, Mrs. Violet turned around and wanted to find a broom to drive him out. Violet saw this and quickly got up from the sofa and walked over. Mom, you're still helping him." Mrs. Violet screamed in anger. Violet quickly shook her head. "I'm not helping him. But we have a guest at home tonight. You can't damage your image because of someone who isn't worth it. Don't you think so?" Mrs. Violet thought that what she said was quite reasonable. Then she turned around and looked at Finn awkwardly. "Don't mind me." Finn smiled. As for Jason, the way he looked at Finn was as if he wanted to cut the man into pieces. However, Finn wasn't afraid of him at all. He even got up and walked in front of Jason. He asked with a smile, "Is President Jason especially fond of the feeling of something unobtainable and something already lost? Like Luna in the past, and Violet now. He couldn't forget about them when he couldn't get them, and he remained bitter after losing them." Jason was provoked. Just because he could endure Violet's mother didn't mean he would endure Finn as well. Moreover, it was Finn who provoked him first. He sneered and fought back. "Is teaching you to steal someone else's partner the family education of the Finn family? Finn, isn't stealing someone else's partner better than cheating during marriage?" After a pause, he pretended to be puzzled and asked again. "When President Jason cheated during marriage, did you ever think there would be today?" Jason completely lost his composure and tried to fight Finn. But Violet stood in front of Finn. Her beautiful face was full of indifference. And her eyes were determined. She seemed to be silently saying that if Jason dared to make a move, she would definitely protect Finn to the end. Jason was stunned. He remembered that once in the past, when he was plotted against and the other party's car rushed towards him recklessly, Violet rushed over and hugged him tightly. At that moment, Violet had the determination to die. Even if she died, she wanted to protect Jason. If that wasn't love, then what was? But somehow, that love disappeared. Now Violet was protecting another man. Jason just felt a sudden pain in his heart. As if he had been stabbed invisibly. His eyes became a little red. And his voice became hoarse. Violet, I just wanted to have dinner with you. What a humble wish. It was so humble that Violet even felt like laughing a bit. Once upon a time, she would call Jason every day and ask him if he would come back for dinner at night. Most of the time, Jason said he had social engagements and wouldn't come back. Occasionally, when he was in a good mood, he would be kind enough to come back and have a meal or two with her. Every time, Violet would cook in person and make a big table of dishes that he liked. Even if Jason didn't eat much and sometimes even criticized her cooking skills. But as long as the two of them sat at the same table and under the same roof, Violet would feel happy. Jason, we could have dinner together every day before, but you didn't want to. Now, I don't want to either. So, are you taking revenge on me? There's no need. Violet said in a flat voice. I just want to have a good meal with my parents. You can go back. Jason didn't leave immediately. It wasn't until Violet took her mother's hand and called Finn, and the three of them went to the living room on their own, completely leaving him alone at the entrance hall. That kind of complete disregard. Let alone a proud son of heaven like Jason. Even an ordinary person would be driven crazy. Jason finally couldn't bear it anymore and turned around and quickly walked out of the Violet family's house. Violet heard the sound and casually glanced at the door. It was good that he left. Otherwise, nobody would have an appetite tonight. After Jason made such a fuss, Violet's parents naturally felt embarrassed to mention the matter of letting Violet get in touch with Finn again. It's just that when Finn was about to leave, Violet's mother asked Violet to see him off. Violet didn't decline because she had something to say to Finn alone. Finn seemed to have sensed her intention too. As soon as they got to the car, he asked Violet straightforwardly, what do you want to tell me, Violet? Violet was a bit surprised, and then couldn't help laughing. Sorry for making you watch a joke tonight. Whose joke? Your ex-husband's? Violet. Although she was speechless, it was really humorous. Violet could sense that Finn was deliberately trying to cheer her up, so she had to make it clear. Finn, I didn't feel why I'd say. I haven't officially divorced Jason yet, and even if I get officially divorced, I don't have any intention of starting a new relationship for the time being. Tonight's dinner was arranged by my parents. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Finn, who said it was a waste of my time? If I didn't want to come, no one could force me. Then, I can wait for you to get divorced. Violet, there's no need. Really no need. Violet shook her head. Finn, you're still young and have many choices. I'm not suitable for you. Whether it's suitable or not should be up to me to decide. But we just met for the first time today. Finn, it's not the first time. It's the third time. Violet was shocked. Because in her impression, although she had heard others mention the young master of the Finn family before, she had never seen him. She hadn't even seen a photo of him and couldn't match him at all. Where did we meet? 4 years ago. On the streets of New York. At that time, Violet and Jason had been married for a year. Jason went on a business trip to New York. Violet went there quietly. Originally, heading for Silhouette, she wanted to celebrate Jason's birthday and give him a surprise. But when Violet arrived at the hotel, she saw Jason entering the elevator with a young girl. Jason's coat was draped over that young girl. The young girl looked up, acting coquettously and flirting with Jason. Jason lowered his eyes, with a gentle smile on his lips. That was a side of Jason that Violet had never seen since they got married. She took out her phone and called Jason. Jason replied on the other end without blushing or panting. I'm busy. I'll call you when I'm free. The moment he finished speaking, he hung up the phone. He didn't give Violet a chance to say another word. Violet left the hotel sadly. She remembered that the streets of London that day were bitterly cold. The wind blowing on her face was like being slapped with a cold iron object. She walked aimlessly on the road. She accidentally bumped into someone and forgot to apologize. Finn said, "I was the one you bumped into that day." Violet suddenly realized, "Sorry." After a pause, she asked again, "Then when did you see me in Haas High?" 3 years ago. I went to Haas High to celebrate a friend's birthday. The hotel I stayed in was near your company. At that time, Finn was sitting in the car and had a fleeting glance at Violet's side face. But the encounter on the streets of London was so impressive to him. A beautiful Chinese woman was walking aimlessly in the heavy snow, looking lost. She bumped into him. Didn't apologize or show any reaction. Just stared at him blankly for 2 seconds, and then continued walking. Finn remembered her. Later, he also asked people to check on her. When he learned that she was also from Jing City, he was a bit excited at first. But then he learned that she was already married, and her husband seemed to be really messed up. After getting married, he still couldn't forget about his ex-girlfriend, and even took his ex-girlfriend back home to live with them despite his wife's pregnancy. At that time, Finn thought that Jason was really ungrateful. He meant if Violet was with him, he would definitely make Violet happy every day, and would never let the scene on the streets of London happen again. Maybe God heard his prayer. So he met Violet again in Haas High. At that time, Violet and Jason had already fallen out. She went to Haas High without telling anyone. After learning the inside story, Finn naturally helped her hide her whereabouts. Later, he heard that Jason was investigating her and even asked his friends in Haas High to help cut off the clues of Jason's investigation. Originally, having fulfilled my inside. When I was in Haas High, I wanted to get to know you. But something happened at that time and I had to rush back to London. Violet nodded and casually said, "Then we're quite fated." The speaker didn't mean anything by it, but the listener took it to heart. The corners of Finn's mouth turned up again and again. But seeing that Violet's attitude was quite firm, he didn't dare to be too pushy. After a friendly goodbye, Finn got in the car and left. Violet turned around, ready to go home. However, out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of a person standing in the shadow of the corner. She was startled and quickly turned her head. It was Jason. After coming out of the Violet family's house, he hadn't left. He watched through the window as Violet and Finn sat at the same table having dinner, chatting and laughing. Violet's parents were also very polite to Finn and kept putting food in his bowl. After dinner, they sat together chatting. Finally, hadn't fulfilled Violet softened out. Finn said that he had already met Violet twice before. His liking for Violet, from his expression to his eyes, was all revealing it. Jason was already feeling irritable, because Violet insisted on getting a divorce. Now there was Finn too. He really felt that he was about to explode. "Violet." Jason's voice was low and repressed as if he was in extreme pain. But Violet's expression didn't change at all. She was truly completely disheartened. No matter what kind of appearance Jason put on in front of her, there wouldn't be much fluctuation in her heart or on her face. And the reason why Jason was in such pain was largely because he had heard the conversation between Violet and Finn. To be fair, the Finn family had a good development in Jing City. Finn was also good-looking. If Violet really wanted to find a new partner, Finn would be a very good choice. But Violet didn't. She clearly refused Finn without any sign of ambiguity. Unlike Jason, when he and Violet were still husband and wife, he was already involved with Luna. The difference in character was obvious. Jason felt very uncomfortable in his heart, and could only change the topic and asked about what happened in London that year. Violet quietly looked at the night sky in the distance. The weather tonight wasn't good, and the night was continuous. Just like when she saw Jason with that young girl in the hotel in New York that day. There was a continuous depression in her heart. She had known from the beginning that Jason didn't love her. So when she saw that scene, she didn't even have the courage to go up and question him. She was afraid that Jason's answer would be what she thought. And she was also afraid that the answer would be even worse, and make her even more embarrassed. Violet said, "I did go to see you that day. But later I found that the heavy snow on the streets of New York was also very beautiful. The snow was cold, just like her heart." After bumping into Finn, she continued walking for a long time. Walking alone. Slowly. Finally, heading fulfilledly. When her whole body was frozen numb, she found a place by the roadside and sat down. Then she took out her phone and was about to buy a plane ticket to go back to China. But her fingers were also frozen stiff. She didn't know where she clicked. And suddenly it jumped to a music app. The song Sunny on July 7th started playing automatically. Tears kissed my face instead of you. Suddenly, my world became icy and snowy. Get the divorce certificate? Obviously. Luna didn't believe what she said and was so angry that she didn't even dare to open her eyes. Hope it's just my illusion. I lost consciousness. The sky was boundless. Back then, what then? Violet was on the streets of New York, crying bitterly to the rhythm of those lyrics one after another. Later, after she returned to Beijing, she had a high fever for several days. It wasn't until the day Jason came back that her health improved a little. However, Jason didn't seem to notice her abnormality. He didn't even ask, "How are you during the days when I was away?" Probably because he had a good time during those days himself. The past is like smoke. Whether good or bad, it's all gone. Violet withdrew her gaze and smiled faintly. Next time when there's a chance, I'll still go to the streets of New York to watch the snow. Jason, with me? How is that possible? Violet gave him a sidelong glance. It was as if she was saying, "What on earth are you thinking? Are you worthy of going with me?" Jason stared at her blankly. Only at this moment did Jason realize that he didn't know Violet that well. She wasn't always gentle and would also have a bit of a temper. When she gave someone that sidelong glance, her eyebrows and eyes were full of vitality, so vivid that people couldn't help being attracted. Suddenly, he was jealous that Finn had seen another side of Violet a long time ago, even if it was the other side of her when she was in a daze. But at least that was the real Violet. Jason smiled silently, with self-mockery in his eyes. He asked Violet softly, "Do you think that I slept with that girl?" "Violet, I used to think so. But now, it's none of my business. But I want to explain." Jason lowered his stance and spoke clearly word by word in the night. "When I took her back to the room, I did have some scoundrel-like thoughts. But after answering your call, suddenly I didn't want to do it anymore. If you hadn't left so quickly, you should have seen that girl leave." Violet, oh. Let's not say whether this explanation is true or not for now. Even if it's true, didn't he also want to have a relationship with someone else at the very beginning? Just because it didn't happen in the end doesn't mean the initial ill intention can be erased. Violet didn't dare to think about how much pain she would feel in her heart if she still loved Jason and heard him explain like this. Fortunately, hadn't fulfilled my answer. She didn't love him anymore. Violet turned around expressionlessly. Jason called out to her. "Violet." A term that should have been intimate but now made people feel disgusted. Violet didn't turn her head back. Instead, she even quickened her pace and went into the house. Suddenly, the wind blew outside. Jason stood in the cold wind, feeling that the temperature of his body was being taken away bit by the wind. It was so cold that it seemed he would die in the next second. He hoped that Violet would come to save him. But he also clearly knew that Violet wouldn't come. "Violet. Have I really lost you completely?" The next day, Violet took the contract to the Jason family's group. It should be that Jason had given instructions in advance. So she had a smooth journey from the moment she entered the gate. Even when the elevator reached the top floor, Jason's assistant was already waiting there in advance. "Madam." Xander still addressed her as before. Violet corrected him. "I'm here on business today. Please call me Violet." Xander was slightly stunned. He seemed quite surprised at her change. But as a subordinate, Xander naturally wouldn't go against what his boss's wife meant. Even if his boss and his wife were in the middle of a divorce. Xander led Violet to Jason's office. After knocking on the door and entering, Xander withdrew first. Violet casually looked around. It was still the same as before. Except that there was an extra photo frame on Jason's desk. Since it was facing away from Violet, she couldn't see whose photo was in that frame. Violet didn't want to look either. She put on a professional smile and stepped forward to greet Jason politely. "President Jason. Here is the contract we've prepared. Please have a look." Jason took it but didn't open it immediately. Instead, he put it aside. Then, he took out a folder from the drawer and handed it to Violet. "What is this?" Violet asked subconsciously. "Jason, open it and see." Violet opened it as she was told. What caught her eye were 5 big characters: divorce agreement. Besides being shocked, Violet quickly read it through. It wasn't the one she had left before. It should be that Jason had asked a lawyer to draw it up anew. The terms in the agreement were still favorable to her. Jason had given her quite a lot of property. After reading it, Violet looked up and stared at Jason steadily. Actually, she hadn't thought that Jason would agree to the divorce in such a short time. After all, before that, Jason had been clamoring to see the child. Violet had thought that they would have to be entangled for at least some more time before the formal divorce. But now, Jason gave her a divorce agreement. It could almost be called a fair divorce agreement. Violet looked up at him in disbelief. Jason smiled slightly. On his handsome face, there was a tenderness that Violet rarely saw. His voice was also gentle. "Take a look. If there's no problem, sign your name in your column." Hearing this, Violet's eyes became complicated. Given Jason's previous attitude, she had thought that if she wanted to part on good terms, they would have to be entangled for a while longer. Unexpectedly, this day had come so soon. She didn't know what had happened after Jason left her house last night. Why did he suddenly come to his senses? Violet had many questions in her heart, but she didn't ask them. She just wanted to sign the divorce agreement and get divorced as soon as possible. Everything else could wait. However, just when she picked up the pen to sign, Jason suddenly leaned over and held her hand. "Violet." Violet kept her gaze down. Didn't respond. And didn't look at him. Jason's palm was pressed against the back of her hand. Violet could feel that his palm was warm and dry. The warm feeling spread little by little from the place where their skin touched, carrying an out-of-place ambiguity. At least in Violet's opinion, there should be no more physical contact between her and Jason. She moved her wrist, trying to break free from Jason's palm. At this time, Jason asked her, "Violet, do we have to get divorced?" Violet nodded. "Yes, having fulfilled my obsession. We have to." Jason smiled sadly and suddenly seemed to have all his strength drained away. He fell back onto the chair. Violet bent over and quickly wrote her name in the column where she needed to sign. Then she pushed the divorce agreement back in front of Jason. "President Jason. It's your turn." Jason picked up the pen. Violet watched as the tip of the pen got closer and closer to the place for signing bit by bit. She held her breath and finally didn't even dare to look. She slightly shifted her gaze and just stared with the corner of her eye. She saw Jason write 3 words forcefully. Violet immediately let out a big sigh of relief. She reached out to take the divorce agreement, and Jason didn't stop her. However, when she looked down, she found that what Jason had written wasn't his own name. Instead, it was another 3 words: "Forgive me." The firm and powerful handwriting was trembling obviously when the last stroke fell. Violet's eyes hurt from those 3 words. She turned her gaze away in embarrassment. She heard the chair move. It was Jason standing up and walking in front of her. Jason's eyes were even redder than hers. It seemed that there was a handful of sand in his throat, and his voice was extremely hoarse. "Violet, can you forgive me? Could she? 10 years of admiration and 2 years of marriage. Could it really start all over again?" Violet's mind seemed to have crashed. She didn't think about anything for a long time. Until Xander's anxious voice came from outside the door. "Luna. President Jason is receiving guests. You can't just go in." It was Luna who came. At the moment when Jason was being extremely emotional and almost moved Violet, Luna angrily burst in. All the emotions were interrupted and the atmosphere was ruined. Jason's face immediately turned cold. When he turned to look at Luna, it was as if he was looking at something lifeless. Luna felt a chill in her heart and even paused her steps. But then she remembered the purpose of her coming here today and had to muster up her courage to walk in front of Jason. Jason. She still habitually pretended to be weak. When she looked at Violet, her eyes seemed to be filled with horror. Violet. What a coincidence that you're also here. Violet had no expression on her face and didn't respond to her sarcastic greeting. So Luna turned back and continued to say to Jason. Jason let out a low sigh. I brought someone to see you. Jason, I'm not free now. But this person is very important. Luna's tone was insistent and she looked at Violet again. Obviously the person she brought might be related to Violet. Jason had already lost all his patience with her, but seeing her like this, he was also curious about who the person was. Luna immediately shouted towards the outside. Iris. Come in. Iris? Wasn't she the female college student and who accompanied me to the hospital for the operation back then? How did she get involved with Luna? Violet looked at the door in shock. Then as soon as Iris entered the door, their eyes met. Iris was both surprised and happy. Violet. Why are you here? Violet smiled at her and then looked at Luna. Visibly, having feebly. Luna panicked. She knew that Jason had been investigating recently whether Violet had given birth to the child or not. Luna thought that as long as she could prove that Violet hadn't given birth to the child, then naturally there would be no point for Jason and Violet to be entangled anymore. So she tried her best to find evidence and finally found Iris. Luna was so excited that she brought Iris back to Beijing from Shanghai overnight. Today she brought Iris to see Jason early in the morning. But what she told Iris was, she and Violet were best friends. Jason had hurt Violet so much that she couldn't stand it. Now Jason was still pestering Violet because of the child and might even hurt Violet again. So she hoped that Iris could come to Jason and tell him personally how decisive Violet was when she had the abortion back then. In this way, Jason would naturally give up the idea of continuing to look for the child and wouldn't pester Violet anymore. Iris believed Luna's lies and came with her. But Luna never expected that Violet would be in Jason's office today. The two of them seemed to be on the verge of rekindling their old relationship. Wen's and her stopped her from coming in just now. She had even suspected that Jason had a new lover. It turned out to be Violet. Luna was so angry that it seemed a fire was burning in her heart, burning away all her rationality. She gritted her teeth and asked Violet. Since you left, why did you come back? Violet, don't worry. I'm not back to compete with you for him. I'm just back to get the divorce certificate with him. She smiled again and said, can't we get the divorce certificate if you don't come back? The Jason family is in Jing City. Can't they even manage to get a divorce certificate? Oh, you're right. As if enlightened by her words, Violet suddenly realized and said, it's easy for the Jason family to get a divorce certificate. Then tell me, why hasn't it been done in the past 3 years? Because Jason didn't want to divorce. In fact, the first person who noticed that Jason had fallen in love with Violet wasn't Chase but Luna. 3 days after Violet left quietly, Jason began to be out of sorts. He often stared blankly at something in the house. He would also wake up suddenly in the middle of the night and then stand on the balcony smoking like crazy. On such a cold day, he was only wearing a thin nightgown. When Luna found him, she felt that he was almost frozen into an ice cube. But no matter who asked Jason if he missed Violet, he would answer without hesitation, no. Such duplicity was exactly like this. From that time on, Luna began to be afraid that if Violet came back, she might never be able to stay by Jason's side again. So in the past 3 years, she had actually urged and forced Jason countless times, wanting a legitimate identity. But every time, Jason either escaped or lost his temper. Later, as long as she brought up this matter, Jason would just turn around and leave directly. The former first love, once truly obtained, became like a grain of rice stuck on the clothes and would have to be taken off and thrown away sooner or later. Luna looked at Jason with a heartbroken look. Jason. Jason didn't even look at her and just raised his hand to signals and her to take her out. At first, Luna refused and even threw tantrums in the office. Jason then warned her coldly, if you want to be thrown out by the security guards, I'll make it happen for you. Jason. Get out. Luna didn't dare to confront him head-on and could only transfer all her anger to Violet. If looks could kill, Violet felt that she would have been torn to pieces by now. Luna left with hatred in her eyes. Xander didn't come in again either. In the huge office, there were only Violet, Jason, and Iris. Jason asked Iris, "What did Luna ask you to say?" Iris looked at him, seeming a little afraid. After all, in front of outsiders, as the president of the Jason family group, Jason was quite imposing. When he put on a cold face, he looked intimidating even without getting angry. Iris moved closer to Violet. Violet took her hand to comfort her. "It's okay. Just say whatever you want to say." Since Luna had already brought the person in front of Jason, then the matter of her having an abortion was bound to come to light. Actually, Violet wasn't flustered in her heart. Because from the very beginning, she had said that she didn't keep the child. It was Jason who didn't believe her. It was also Jason who insisted on using this as a reason to keep pestering her. Violet smiled faintly and repeated the previous sentence. "Jason, we really don't have a child." By this time, Jason actually didn't doubt Violet's words anymore. But he still couldn't help making a last-ditch struggle. "But I clearly checked before that you went for a prenatal checkup. That was a misunderstanding." That time, Violet went to the hospital for a follow-up visit. Because she was in a hurry due to something urgent and almost bumped into a pregnant woman. After avoiding her in a hurry, both of their things fell to the ground. The other party took Violet's medical card by mistake. That's why when Jason sent people to check later, what they found was that Violet had a prenatal checkup. But there was only that one time. Throughout the whole pregnancy process, it was impossible to have only one prenatal checkup. Jason had actually noticed something was wrong long ago. Before, he kept arguing that Violet should hand over the child, but he was just deceiving himself. He hoped that Violet had already given birth to the child. At least in that case, it wouldn't be a real end between him and Violet. Jason's face was full of gloomy defeat. A tall man over 1.8 meters, standing there at this moment, seemed on the verge of falling, giving people an illusion of being weak. Iris couldn't bear to see it. And she remembered how Violet looked as if she had lost all hope on the day of the operation. She couldn't help but say, "The child isn't in your belly. But you're so sad knowing that the child is gone." Then think about it. When Violet went to have the operation alone, how sad must she have been? Sad? Suddenly, Violet couldn't quite remember how sad she was on that day. Maybe she hadn't completely gotten over it at that time. So her heart still hurt a lot. Especially when it was time to enter the operating room. Her heart seemed to be numb with pain. She walked in a daze every step of the way. It was as if the place she was about to go to wasn't the operating room but hell. At that time, the nurse saw that her face was extremely pale and was a little worried, asking her if she wanted to change the time for the operation. Violet didn't change the time. Because she knew that if she didn't hold on to her courage that day until the end, later on, it was very likely that she wouldn't be willing to have the child removed. But she didn't want to give birth to a child related to Jason. She never wanted to have anything to do with Jason again. Iris was still whispering about the scene on that day. With every word she said, the corresponding scene automatically emerged in Violet's mind. Some were sad, some were sorrowful, and some were very painful. But Violet had been standing straight all the time, with an expression on her face that couldn't be calmer. It was as if those pains had never happened to her. On the contrary, Jason, after hearing half of it, suddenly hissed at Iris. "Stop talking." Iris was startled and stopped talking. Jason turned to Violet. He seemed to have thousands of words to say. But in the end, he couldn't say a single word. What could he say? No matter what he said, it couldn't offset the pain that Violet had endured back then. Jason turned around, with his back to Violet and Iris. Violet guessed that he must have broken down emotionally. But because Iris, an outsider, was still there, he wanted to maintain his pride, so he didn't let them see. Violet asked Iris to go off first. Then she walked over, picked up the folder she had brought, and said to Jason, "If President Jason is still willing to cooperate with our company, feel free to contact me. I'll leave first today." Violet, Does President Jason have any other instructions? Besides cooperation. Is there nothing else we can talk about? Talk about feelings? Violet tilted her head and smiled playfully. That's not appropriate. Is it? What about talking about divorce? No need. Violet was still smiling. But there was a hidden edge in her smile. I've already filed a lawsuit. Since Jason didn't want to part on good terms. Then they could meet in court. Jason was shocked by her move and spoke very slowly. You filed for divorce? Yes. Then what about the cooperation? You're suing me. Do you still expect me to cooperate with you? Of course she didn't expect that. So Violet lowered her head to look at the message she had just received on her phone. As if the gloomy weather had finally seen some sunshine after a long time. She didn't bother to hide anything from Jason either. Since they were all in this city, he would find out about something sooner or later. So Violet told him directly, President Jason. My colleague has just reached an agreement with Shanghua Technology. Originally, hadn't fulfilled my adsi. The company had only sent her back to Jing City alone. On the morning before leaving, Violet called the boss and said that she would take another colleague. Kane hadn't fulfilled my adsi. With her. It was the man that Jason saw when he went to the hotel to look for Violet and saw her chatting and laughing with a man as they walked out of the elevator. That man was Kane. Violet knew that Kane had some feelings for her. Before, Kane had also tested her attitude, perhaps seeing that her attitude was firm. He didn't make his feelings clear. Originally, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. Kane thought that this time Violet deliberately asked him to come along. Maybe things would take a turn for the better. But that day, when he heard Jason say that Violet hadn't formally divorced yet, besides being sad, he remembered that Violet's ex was Jason. And Kane completely sobered up. There would never be a possibility between him and Violet. Violet also pretended that nothing had happened and helped him build a connection with Shanghua Technology so that he could go there to negotiate. After he reached an agreement, he immediately sent a message to Violet. To prevent Violet from continuing to waste time and energy acting with Jason here, Violet opened the folder in her hand, took out the few sheets of paper inside, and then tore them up bit by bit in front of Jason and threw them into the trash can. Jason watched her quietly. On the surface, he seemed calm. But in fact, his hand hanging by his side had already clenched into a fist, and the veins on the back of his hand were showing. He smiled, but the smile had no warmth. And his voice had no warmth either. Violet. You're still in Jing City now. Don't you really think that I can't do anything to you? Violet shook her head and affirmed to him, with President Jason's abilities. It's too easy for you to do something to me. Then how dare you provoke me in person? Jason completely lost his composure and roared angrily. Violet shook her head again. I'm not provoking you. I just want to tell you that there are other choices for both feelings and cooperation. If one road doesn't work, then take another one. You can't keep going forward when you know it's a dead end. Violet softened her tone and said earnestly, Jason. All I've always wanted is to part on good terms. I don't want to. Back then, I didn't want you to accompany Luna either. And I didn't want you to bring Luna home. But did you listen to me? Jason was left speechless. Violet thought that it was almost enough to say this. She didn't want to play the role of a know-it-all. It would be best if Jason could take it to heart. If not, then they could just meet in court. Violet left the Jason family group. Just as she reached the car, someone rushed out from the side and pressed on her car door. It was Luna. Violet frowned in dissatisfaction. What are you doing? Luna, let's talk. Violet, there's nothing to talk about between you and me. How could there be nothing? If you want to make up with Jason, at least you have to make me willing to step aside. Right? Violet gave her a funny look. Sorry. I don't want to make up with Jason. Luna. He's a treasure in your eyes. But not in mine. Violet's words were very sincere. Both her expression and her eyes showed obvious disgust for Jason. Luna was both shocked and confused. You really don't love Jason anymore? I stopped loving him when I left. Then go back to Ha's High immediately and never show up in front of Jason again. Violet. She was as crazy as she was 3 years ago. She thought that others would listen to her. But she didn't think about who she was. 3 years ago. If Violet hadn't given up completely, just relying on Luna, she might not have been able to drive Violet away. At the very least, the parents of both families were on Violet's side. Those relatives and friends, in order to show that they were just, wouldn't support Luna either. It was just that Violet had been hurt to the extreme and finally realized that for someone like Jason, it wasn't worth sacrificing her own life. But Violet found that Luna and Jason were actually quite a match. Especially when they lost their temper. They were equally stubborn and ridiculous. Violet didn't want to talk to Luna anymore. She pulled Luna's hand away and got into the car by herself, and locked the car door immediately. Luna pulled on it twice outside. When she couldn't open it, she began to knock on the car window with a bang bang bang. Violet didn't even spare her a glance. She released the brake and the car moved forward slowly. Luna was so enraged by her haughty attitude that a trace of viciousness quickly flashed through her eyes. She cursed and went back to her own car. Without even fastening her seat belt, she stepped on the accelerator all the way down and chased after Violet in the direction she left. At that time, Violet had just driven out of the parking lot. Hearing the urgent roar of the car, coming from behind, she subconsciously looked through the rearview mirror. It seemed to be Luna. Suddenly, her heart tight and a bad premonition spread rapidly. Violet immediately wanted to step on the accelerator to escape from Luna's sight. But it was too late. Luna stepped on the accelerator to the bottom as if she had lost her mind. She didn't care that it was a main road outside. Nor did she care whether there would be a chain reaction after hitting Violet. At this moment, she had gone crazy. She just wanted Violet dead. A huge crashing sound rang out. And Violet's car was directly rammed and flew into the air. She felt as if she had rolled over in the air for several rounds and then landed quickly. That feeling of weightlessness was really unpleasant. She was eager to grab something, but she couldn't hold on to anything. Her hands could only flail in the air. There was another bang sound. Violet's car fell to the ground, continued to slide forward, and crashed through the median strip. The oncoming cars all made emergency evasive maneuvers. The sounds of horns, screams, collisions, and all kinds of chaotic noises mixed together. Violet saw that innocent passers-by were affected and fell to the ground with blood all over their faces. She subconsciously wanted to go and help them up, but at this moment, she couldn't move at all. It hurt so much. Every part of her body hurt. Moreover, her whole body was sticky. She must have lost a lot of blood. Was she going to die? Why had she tried so hard to get rid of Jason? But in the end, she was still going to die at the hands of someone related to Jason? Andor rushed into Jason's office. Jason was still angry with Violet. After all, the whole city of Jing knew that the Jason family group and Shanghua Technology didn't get along. In the past 2 years, Shanghua Technology had secretly cooperated with the Finn family group, thinking that they had more confidence. They paid even less attention to the Jason family group, and Violet had chosen Shanghua Technology. The embarrassment of being slapped in the face by his own wife made Jason angrier and angrier as he thought about it. Seeing Andor rush in, he coldly ordered, "Go and check what project Shanghua Technology has been working on recently and who their partners are." Xander was extremely anxious. "President Jason, don't worry about Shanghua Technology for now. Madam had an accident downstairs." "What happened?" "Luna went crazy and drove into Madam." Jason was stunned when he heard this. And then his eyes lit up brightly. It was as if a fire of anger suddenly flared up, burning away all his rationality. He wasn't angry with Violet anymore. Nor did he want to deal with Shanghua Technology. At this second, he just wanted to see Violet immediately and make sure that Violet was safe. Jason rushed out of the office. Xander followed closely behind. But when Xander got to the elevator, Jason had already entered the elevator and the metal door was slowly closing. Xander saw through the crack of the door that Jason's face was full of undisguised anxiety. He had followed Jason for 6 years. In the beginning, Jason was still on and off with Luna. Later, Jason proposed to Violet. They got married. And finally Violet disappeared. Xander witnessed all of this. Actually, a long time ago, when Xander talked about his boss with his family, he had said, "I feel that President Jason loves Madam. Otherwise, How could a person who had never been in the kitchen since childhood suddenly start learning cooking skills? Just to make breakfast for the lady at home. During work. If Jason had free time, he would also ask about Violet's whereabouts. But most of the time, Violet was waiting for him to go home at home. At that time, Violet loved Jason so much. So much so that she made herself seem boring. And also made Jason think that such easily obtainable love didn't need to be taken seriously. Later, the two of them finally drifted further and further apart until it was now irreversible. When Jason arrived at the scene of the accident, many people had already gathered there. Someone had called the police and someone had called an ambulance. Through the gaps in the crowd, it could be seen that several people were trying hard to open the door of Violet's car. One of them had a particularly familiar back. It was Finn. He was actually just passing by today. Due to the car accident, the traffic on the road was in a terrible mess. He couldn't leave. And besides, it was human nature to watch the excitement. So he got out of the car to take a look. He was shocked when he saw it. The person in the car accident was actually Violet, especially when he saw Violet lying unconscious in the car with blood all over her face and not responding at all when people outside called her. Finn felt as if his breathing was about to stop. He rushed to Violet's car and, ignoring the kind persuasion of others, tried desperately to open the door. However, the door had been seriously deformed and couldn't be opened no matter what. Someone beside shouted, "The car is leaking oil. It might explode." The onlookers scattered in an instant and everyone hid far away. Only Finn remained where he was. He was holding a stone in his hand and hitting the car window hard, again and again. While hitting, he also shouted, "Violet! Wake up! You mustn't fall asleep." Someone beside him came to help him smash the window. Finn subconsciously looked over. It was actually Jason. Wasn't he afraid of death? There was such a big puddle of oil on the ground. And it could explode at any time. But at this time, Finn didn't have the mood to mock Jason. Even as rivals in love, they had to be on the same side at this moment. The two of them focused on smashing the car window. After hitting it hard more than a dozen times, they finally smashed a big hole. Without a second's hesitation, Finn threw the stone and tried to tear the glass with his bare hands. Then he leaned in, unfastened the seat belt on Violet, and carefully carried her out. The moment Finn turned around, Jason stopped him. "Give her to me. She's my wife. Get out of the way." Finn completely changed from his carefree and smiling appearance last time and became as furious as a lion. Jason was about to say something else. Finn sneered and retorted first. "Who caused her to be like this? If you want her to die here, just stand there." Jason's eyes darkened, and his thin lips were tightly pursed. He knew that they couldn't delay any longer. If the car exploded, none of the three of them would survive intact. Letting Finn carry her away now could at least get her to the hospital earlier. Violet needed treatment. But which man could easily swallow this humiliation? Watching his wife being loved so deeply by someone else. Watching his rival in love take her away right under his nose. It was so embarrassing. It was so humiliating. Jason closed his eyes. Anger and heartache intertwined and crashed around in his body. Wherever they hit, it hurt. But when he opened his eyes again and saw Violet covered in blood, he was scared again. He was afraid that Violet would die. So he couldn't care about any embarrassment or humiliation. He had to make way. Only at this moment did Jason finally truly realize that he had actually loved Violet so deeply. Not far away, Luna, who was also trapped in the car, was on the verge of death. She saw Finn risking his life for Violet and Jason making way for love. Both men could sacrifice their pride and lives for Violet. She couldn't figure out why Violet was so lucky to be loved by both Jason and Finn at the same time. Luna wasn't as seriously injured as Violet. During her hospitalization, there were always police officers guarding her. Her parents came to see her. But the police had a very tough attitude. Later, Luna's parents hired a lawyer. But they still couldn't see Luna. The lawyer came back and told them, "Luna has offended the Violet family, the Jason family, and the Finn family at the same time. Now the three families have united to make her receive the heaviest punishment. This matter is not easy to handle." Luna's parents staggered back a few steps when they heard this, with a look of defeat on their faces. Actually, as early as half a year after Violet left, when they saw that Jason didn't have the intention to marry Luna, they had reminded Luna, if a man really loves you, he won't let you stay with him without a proper status. Even if Violet disappeared and couldn't get divorced, at least he would make a public statement to let everyone know that their marriage had come to an end. But Jason hadn't said anything to the public. Even once when a reporter interviewed him and mentioned Violet in the question, Jason seriously corrected it. It's not Violet. It's Mrs. Jason. Even though Violet had been missing for a long time and he and other girls were notoriously entangled, he still called Violet Mrs. Jason. Luna's mother burst into sad tears. Why didn't she listen? Why didn't she listen? If she had listened to their advice, she wouldn't have ended up like this. Luna's father also sighed beside her. Then the two of them discussed it and thought that they might as well go and beg Jason. Maybe there would be a glimmer of hope. In the hospital, Jason stood at the door of the ward. He had been here for 3 days. But he couldn't get in every day. Violet's mother, Mrs. Violet, was guarding her 24 hours a day just to prevent Jason from entering the ward. In her words, Violet will be unlucky as soon as she gets close to you. You're born to be a jinx to your wife. Jason didn't refute Mrs. Violet's words. Nor could he refute them. It seemed that as soon as Violet was by his side, she would indeed suffer all kinds of harm. The kind of peaceful and happy life that he wanted to give Violet always went in the opposite direction. Jason silently stood at the door of the ward. Occasionally, when nurses went in or out, he could peek inside through the crack of the door. Violet was lying quietly on the bed, with her eyes closed. She looked as if she was asleep. During the day, Finn and Sunny often came over. They basically didn't show a bit attitude towards her either. Chase had followed Sunny here twice. The first time, he secretly opened the door to let Jason see Violet. The second time, he tried to plead for Jason. But in the end, Sunny scolded him severely and drove him away. After that, he was too embarrassed to come by himself. And Sunny wouldn't bring him either. Obviously, having so said why I'm sorry, Jason was Violet's legitimate and legal husband. But at this moment, he didn't even have the qualification to go in and see Violet. Violet was probably in a good mood today and came out to say a few words to him. When you were fooling around with Luna before, Violet was also watching you like this. I'm sorry. You don't need to say sorry to me. Violet doesn't want to hear your apology either. Mrs. Violet rarely didn't speak harshly to him. But the calmer the tone was, the more it showed that the whole Violet family was extremely disappointed in him. Finally, having fulfilled my Mrs. Violet said, Jason, if you really love Violet, you should let her go. If your fate with her hasn't really ended, you can try to win her back with your own abilities in the future. Jason raised his head in disbelief, and a glimmer of light slowly appeared in his eyes. Like a drowning man suddenly grabbing a piece of driftwood, his voice was a bit hoarse. And he asked slowly, can I still do it? Mrs. Violet smiled and looked back at the ward. Whether you can or not depends on what Violet says. Okay. After Jason finished talking with Violet's mother, Luna's parents also rushed over. Obviously, having fulfilled why I'm sorry, they were the elders. But when facing Jason, they were so timid and cautious. Jason, please let us see Luna. Jason, why are you telling me this? I didn't stop you. Luna's parents were choked up. Yet they didn't dare to show any temper at all. The police won't make an exception. But if you step in, there might be a chance. Huh? Jason sneered sarcastically. This sneer chilled Luna's parents' hearts. However, the next second, as if Jason had thought of something, he suddenly changed his mind. All right. I'll take you there. Luna didn't expect that she could still see her parents before going to prison. Especially since it was Jason who brought her parents here. This sparked a glimmer of hope in her heart. Where's Jason? Why didn't he come in with you? Luna asked as she looked towards the door. Luna, wake up. Her mother scolded her sternly. Jason let us come here. Not because he still has feelings for you, but precisely because he has no feelings for you at all. So he let them come to ask Luna why she went crazy and crashed into Violet's car. Luna's mother touched her face and said painfully, "He doesn't love you anymore. Just let it go. Why did you have to do something illegal and criminal and get yourself into trouble?" "Luna, how can I just let it go? I've been entangled with him for over 10 years. Why can you just abandon me like this?" "But he never really wanted you. Even before marrying Violet." The attitude Jason showed them was just that he would go home and talk to his parents. He had never promised that he would definitely persuade his parents and marry Luna. "You should have seen him clearly long ago." "Seen clearly? Haven't I seen clearly?" Luna laughed while crying as if she had gone mad. "I've seen him clearly. That's why I'm so angry." That day, she took Iris to Jason's office. Originally planning to make one last attempt. If she could drive a wedge between Jason and Violet, then maybe she still had a chance. But Violet was there. She also sensed that the two of them seemed to have a sign of getting back together. Why? After her husband died, she endured the bad reputation and stayed with Jason for 3 years. She didn't do it just to wait for Violet to come back and watch them get back together. So at that moment, Luna decided that if she couldn't win Jason back, then she would ruin Violet. If she couldn't have the love she wanted, then Jason shouldn't either. That would be fair. Even if I hadn't crashed into Violet, the outcome wouldn't have been much different. Now, at least I got something out of it. Luna had a look of unrepentant smugness on her face. Seeing this, her parents could only helplessly close their eyes and didn't know what else to say. There are so many people in this world who blindly pursue love and end up getting hurt badly. At first, they wanted Luna to marry someone else because they could see that there would be no good outcome between Jason and her. Who knew that later? Her husband died in an accident and their daughter still got entangled with Jason again. Perhaps it's all fate. "Luna, you should take good care of yourself in there." "What do you mean by, in there?" Luna was stunned for a moment and then she realized it. She started going crazy again. "You're going to send me to prison? How can you send me to prison? You hit people. And not just one. Even if we wanted to protect you, we couldn't." "What about Jason? I've been with him for so many years. Even if he doesn't love me anymore, how could he let me go to prison?" Suddenly, heading for Subway, Luna got off the hospital bed and rushed out, shouting that she wanted to find Jason. The police stopped her, dragged her back to the bedside, and held her down. "Jason! Call Jason over here!" Luna shouted at the top of her lungs. But actually, Jason was right outside. He refused to step into the ward, as if the place where Luna was some filthy place. When Luna in the ward saw him, she immediately calmed down. Because Jason's eyes were so cold. Back in their youth, the two of them had been very close. Luna had seen Jason's gentle and affectionate side and knew that he was capable of loving someone. And now, this bone-chilling look in his eyes meant not only that he didn't love her anymore, Jason hated her because she had hurt Violet. Suddenly, Luna lost all the strength to struggle and just slumped down limply. She sat on the ground, crying and laughing at the same time. Jason looked at her but didn't say a single word from beginning to end. But Luna knew that after he turned around, she would never see him again in this lifetime. "Jason!" She shouted at that figure. But the figure didn't stop and just walked forward on its own. Luna murmured, "I really loved you." Precisely because she had loved him. She was afraid of losing him. Precisely because she loved him too much. She couldn't allow him to get back together with Violet. The moment her anger exploded, all reason and emotions disappeared. She wanted to perish together with them. If that couldn't happen, then, let her perish alone. In the evening, Jason invited Chase to have dinner together. Although it was said to be having dinner, actually Jason hardly ate a few bites throughout the whole process and just kept drinking. Afraid that something might go wrong with Jason from drinking too much, Chase got up and snatched his wine glass away. "What are you doing?" Jason looked up at him dissatisfied. Chase smiled good-naturedly. "You're the only son in your family. If something happens to you from drinking with me, I can't bear the responsibility." "Coward. I'm a coward? I don't know who it is that couldn't even enter the ward door, even though his wife has been hospitalized for so many days." These words really hit Jason hard. But he laughed. Yeah. I'm the real coward. He didn't dare to admit that Violet didn't love him anymore. He also didn't dare to admit that he couldn't win Violet back. So he just kept deceiving himself and refused to go get the divorce certificate. Jason's smile was uglier than crying. He asked Chase in a hoarse voice. Tell me. Is it really me who has harmed Violet? Should I let her go? Chase cared about his brother. But before going out, Sonny had given him a strict order, asking him to persuade Jason to agree to the divorce. After all, if this dragged on any longer, it wouldn't be good for either of them. Chase sighed. What do you really think in your heart? I don't know. Jason raised his head, with a blank look in his eyes. He didn't want to let go, yet he was afraid of hurting Violet again. Although what Violet's mother said was superstitious, it corresponded to one thing. The day before yesterday, I went to Nanshan Temple to draw a lot. I prayed for Violet's safety. But the lot I got was the worst one. He went to ask the abbot in the temple to interpret the lot, hoping to find a glimmer of hope. The abbot said bluntly that if he wanted to get what he wished for, he had to learn to endure the pain and give up his love. Sometimes, the tighter you hold on, the faster it slips away. Jason was already in a bad mood because of the lot drawing thing. Later, when Violet's mother said that he was bad for his wife, his heart was filled with all kinds of mixed feelings and was extremely uncomfortable. Jason closed his eyes, hiding all the glistening tears in his eyes. His voice was a bit ethereal, as if it came from outer space. I know I should let go. But when I think that after letting go, she'll have nothing to do with me anymore, my heart hurts so much. He pointed to his heart and poked it hard again and again, as if he wanted to stab it to pieces. He was really in pain. So painful that he didn't know what to do. So painful that he couldn't cry or make a fuss. As a brother, Chase was quite good at bickering with him usually. But when it came to comforting people, he was really not good at it. So he simply filled both of their wine glasses and then drank a glass. Jason raised his head and drank the wine. But tears slid down from the corners of his eyes. He had never known that losing someone could be so painful. Do you think Violet was like this before she left? She should have been in more pain than you. Because at that time, Violet was pregnant. What she had to give up was not just Jason. There was also the child. The child growing in her belly, breathing with her. Thinking of the child, Jason's heart hurt even more. Actually, when I found out that Luna couldn't have children, I didn't feel much. I even wanted to breathe a sigh of relief. But when I knew that Violet had an abortion, I was so angry that I wanted to kill someone. Even myself. Chase, it's all in the past. For her, it'll never be in the past. Then let's part on good terms. Violet is a soft-hearted person. If we part on good terms, maybe you'll be able to see her again in the future. Will she still want to see me? Yes. Jason seemed to be comforted by these two words. He was crying while smiling. Violet felt that she had slept for a very long time. It was already spring outside, with flowers blooming everywhere. The gentle breeze brought waves of floral fragrance. She dreamed of the past in the fragrance of the flowers. At that time, both she and Jason were still students. They were in the same school but in different grades. At the freshman orientation, Jason let out a low sigh. As an outstanding representative of the senior students, gave a speech on stage. Violet clearly remembered that Jason wore a white shirt that day. The collar was stiff and brand new, making his already chiseled face look even more handsome and three-dimensional. There were many junior female students inquiring about his information off stage. The classmate sitting beside Violet saw that Violet had a calm expression and curiously leaned over and asked, "Don't you think he's handsome?" Violet smiled slightly. Her beautiful and clear face was fair and dazzling among the classmates. She didn't know that Jason on the stage had glanced at her face and then looked back again. Jason didn't know either that it was on that day that the seed of love was quietly planted in her heart. As if predestined, I was attracted to you. And you also looked back at me. But at the end of the dream, Jason and Luna were standing hand in hand on a high place, looking at her and smiling coldly. Jason's eyes were so cold, just one look made people couldn't help shivering. Violet was awakened by fright. She slowly turned her head and saw a person with his back to her watering the flowers by the window. The back was broad and strong, somewhat similar to the person in the dream. Violet took a closer look. It wasn't Jason. It was her father. Violet curved her lips and smiled sweetly. No wonder she thought this back was broad and strong. Who wouldn't like their father's back? When she was little, her father often carried her on his back. "Dad," Violet called out softly, her voice still a bit hoarse from just waking up. The person watering the flowers was startled. He turned around and saw that she had opened her eyes and then excitedly slapped his thigh. "She's awake. Violet's awake. Honey. Honey." Violet's mother, who had just dozed off outside, thought something had happened when she heard him shouting for her and rushed in hurriedly. As soon as she met Violet's eyes, Violet's mother was stunned for a moment, and then her eyes immediately turned red and her voice was choked with sobs. "You naughty kid. You've slept for so long. Mom, I'm sorry." When Violet apologized, her parents felt even more distressed. Tears fell from Violet's mother's eyes. Since the car accident, Violet had been in a coma. Later, after the doctor's examination, there was no major problem with her body, but she still needed to rest and recuperate. As for when she would wake up, no one could be sure. Violet's mother and father thought that bringing her back home to a familiar and warm environment might help Violet recover faster. After discussing with the hospital also agreed, only requiring them to go back for regular checkups. However, Jason had greeted the hospital. He asked the hospital to send people to come to their home every week with medical instruments to conduct examinations for Violet. Violet's mother and father didn't stop this. But they didn't give him a friendly look either. After all, it was because of Jason that Violet got hurt. It was only right that he should do something now. After hearing what her parents said, Violet felt a bit tired. She had just woken up, and many of her body's functions hadn't fully recovered yet. When she lay down, she caught a glimpse of something on the bedside table out of the corner of her eye. Seeing her staring at it, Violet's mother explained. Jason brought this himself. On the first day when Violet was brought home, Jason came to the door with the signed divorce agreement. At that time, Violet's mother and father thought that he was just putting on an act again. Violet's mother directly picked up a baseball bat and wanted to drive Jason out, but Jason just stood there, taking several hits from her without dodging or making a sound. Later, Violet's father was afraid that he would really hurt Jason and had to stop Violet's mother. Then Jason handed over this divorce agreement. He asked the two elders to put the divorce agreement on Violet's bedside, hoping that Violet could see it as soon as she woke up. Up to now, apart from a peaceful divorce, it seemed that there was nothing else he could do for Violet. Violet's mother picked up the divorce agreement and patted it. There was already dust on it. She sighed and said, "This time, Jason should be sincere. Violet, if he wasn't sincere, I would have been dead." Violet's mother. "Right. He made my daughter suffer so much. I won't be touched by him. Violet, fortunately, I'm lucky to be alive. Otherwise, I would have become a ghost of the Jason family even after I died." Violet's mother. She knew that Violet was deliberately trying to make them happy. Because whenever Jason was mentioned, some unpleasant past events would always come to mind. Actually, compared to them, Violet's mentality was a bit better. Violet said, "I'll sign it. And then you can send a copy back to him and tell him a time to go and get the divorce certificate." Okay. The process of getting the certificate was very smooth. It was only when Violet got the divorce certificate that she realized that the current divorce certificates were also red. The staff also happily said to her, "A new life is about to begin." Violet nodded and thanked them. Then the two of them walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau together. There were already people waiting for Violet outside. It was Finn and Kane. Jason took a look at the two of them and then at Violet. Although he knew that he had no right now, he still couldn't help asking, "You and Finn? I'm going back to Haas High. Kane is here to pick me up on behalf of the company." Finn. Violet's expression was rather helpless. "I said there was no need to see me off, but he insisted." Jason pondered for a moment and suddenly smiled. "It's good to have someone see you off." Compared to himself, Finn at least had the chance to see her off. Even if it was a chance that he got by being pushy. It still made Jason extremely envious. Emotion surged in his heart. And his eyes began to feel sour. Jason closed his eyes. Forced down all his emotions. And then pretended to be unrestrained and said, "Have a safe journey. Violet, thank you." She walked forward with big strides. Kane and Finn were waving to her. There were 2 pairs of eyes following her from behind. When she was about to get into the car, Jason seemed unable to hold back and called out again, "Violet." Violet turned around with a bright smile on her face. She was standing in the sunlight, while Jason was standing in the shade. Their eyes met, as if there were thousands of words. But in the end, everything became calm again. Violet asked in a calm voice, "What's the matter? Is there anything else?" Jason, "Nothing. You. Have a safe journey." "Yeah. Take care too. From now on, we will never meet again like mountains and rivers that never cross paths. I won't ask about your past. Jason. Goodbye. Jason. Never see you again." The end.